right, I think we should probably start. First of all, thanks everyone for showing up. This is probably the largest group of people I've spoken to in 3 years in real life. So I really do appreciate showing up for this. It probably is. Steve, whatever. You're not talking today. So this is what we're doing. So the title of the session is AAD Dynamic Groups. They're not great. Let's make that better with PowerShell. Hopefully that resonates with some of you here. And so basically today, if I go to my thing here, first we'll do the sponsors. Thank you to all the sponsors, especially Patch My PC. I hear they're a great group of people. Cool. A little bit about me, if no one has met me before or doesn't use the internet. I am a Microsoft MVP in enterprise mobility, primarily Intune stuff. I am the Australian that works for Patch My PC. That's all I do. I'm just Australian. I drink beer. I am the unpaid intern at Intune training. So I do a training series with this guy at the front here. I don't know, we talk a lot. It's awful. I write blog posts at powers-hell.com. You should definitely go there just because it looks cool. And I put all of my code and everything that I do in this sort of stuff up on GitHub immediately. So strongly recommend checking that out. There's maybe some cool stuff up there. Okay, so as I said, the session is about how can we fix AAD dynamic groups, because conceptually it's a really important thing to do, but it just doesn't work as well as everyone wants it to, or hopefully it could one day be. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to leverage Microsoft Graph and PowerShell to roll our own dynamic groups that will make you look like a wizard. All of this stuff, I've talked about this at length previously, so I'm hoping that most of the concepts that I'm talking about, most of the people in the room will be able to do this stuff very quickly and fairly easily, so that we're just going to go through now. So quick agenda. So why do we need to do this? A brief history of pain. What can we do to fix that pain? How hard is it? And come on, let's just get to the demo, because no one really cares about me talking. Okay, so here's the why. So primarily, Azure AD dynamic groups were built to sort of replicate things that we could do in AD, or even in collections in Config Manager. So they seem good, but then you have to use them, and you realize that this is just like what's happening. You build a group, you have all your criteria put in, and then all of a sudden all the devices just magically show up. You go, this is amazing. You then change a thing, and it doesn't reflect. There's no force sync. There's no way to, technically there is, but you're not supposed to know that. You can get into trouble. I could. But it just takes a really, really long time for that process to sort of rerun. And I think if anyone's played with this stuff, the fastest way to get a dynamic group to change is to build a new dynamic group. Because when you create the rule, it immediately runs and scans against your environment and then successfully builds the thing if your rules were set up correctly. So yeah, it's a pain. So as I said, fast initially. The key thing here is that revalidation is measured in hours, and this is technically official. There are SLAs on the internet that will sort of explain what the expectation is, but the revalidation is very much measured in hours. The other primary thing, and this is kind of what I'm hoping to solve here for everyone, is that right now AAD dynamic groups have very limited scope for membership filters and validation. I think a lot of people, hopefully in this room, their first experience of using dynamic groups was for Intune. So you have all these devices, you have all these apps, you have users, you have all these things, and you're like, cool, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a dynamic group based on X, Y, and Z. That's first name of Steve. You could actually probably do that. That's probably a bad example. But so you have all this data, it's there, it's really robust. I want to make a dynamic group based on that. You can't, because dynamic groups exist as an object of Azure Active Directory, not Intune. It's a completely separate system. That's primarily the problem. So we want to get the data from Intune, and we want to use that to build our own dynamic groups. Okay, so that's kind of the next part of the history of pain. So filters were introduced, and it's a thing for Intune to kind of solve that problem, the initial first problem where it just takes way too long. So filters appeared, everything got fast. I really enjoyed doing that. So essentially, the way that filters work, so revalidation is actually measured in milliseconds. I was speaking with someone who actually said internally is measured in nanoseconds, which I just think is amazing. The way that they solve that is they essentially do it at the device level. When it gets a policy, they run that filter immediately. So every single time a policy or an app or whatever goes down to the machine, they do that test really quickly. So it's not done at the cloud level, it's done on the device level. So that's why it's a lot faster. Now, I kind of wish that this was the end of the session and we could just say filters solved everything. But I'm obviously here and I have 38 minutes left, so obviously something's wrong. So again, we're still limited in that scope because as much as it's a feature that exists in Intune, we're still dealing with groups that are an AAD thing. So the metadata can't sort of cross, I want to use the term cross streams, but it's probably cross boundaries. So, we've still got that primary issue. And right now, filters only work for devices, so there's no user filtering. Now, I'm sure that will change, but right now, it's device filtering. So, you can have your great filters and rules and stuff, but if you want to do user-based things, you're kind of stuck. Okay, so what is the solution to fix this? We obviously all know, and deep in our hearts, we know that this should be a very easy solution, and we just constantly want the best things. Sometimes the easiest thing is just to build your own thing. Hopefully not spending a lot of time on the code because fingers crossed this will be a problem that is solved and we don't have to do this sort of stuff. But for right now, we just sort of have to do that. And that's where knowing PowerShell and Azure functions and things like that come into play. So we're going to build our own membership validation service today. And because we know PowerShell, we can do this really, really quickly. So we're going to use a whole bunch of buzzword toys that we're going to use for this. So we're going to leverage Microsoft Graph. Everyone knows what that is right now. I don't need to go into that like I did in 2019. We're going to use PowerShell. I think maybe some of you guys know that. We're going to use Azure Functions as the trigger point to sort of host the code. We're going to write it all in VS Code, and then we're going to do some CI/CD pipeline magic in GitHub Actions if I have time. Okay, so the next one is, how hard is this? Medium-ish, I put down. I had a very long conversation with Steve about this, and he didn't agree with me. He thinks it's a little more advanced than that, but I think that everyone in here has a fairly decent knowledge of PowerShell, and if you haven't worked with Graph, it's super easy once you sort of understand the basic concepts. I think potentially, unless you've got experience with Azure Functions, that might be the thing that slows you down a little bit. But hopefully I can sort of show you the pipeline that I use to do this sort of stuff today. And that's primarily the focus. The solution is really easy. I just want to show you how I go from nothing to a fully featured function app written in PowerShell, in hopefully 36 minutes and 24 seconds. So as I said, hopefully by the end of this, you should be able to do this yourself, and you should be able to do this on any device that you have available right now. The key sort of way that we get around that is that we're going to be using Docker, and we're going to be using a couple of really cool things in VS Code or VS Code extensions that were created by Microsoft to do remote container development in Docker. You don't need to know Docker at all. I genuinely don't know enough about it, and I need to improve that, but having this stuff installed is going to help you. So we'll get through a little bit around what we need to get started. First, I just want to really quickly go through what the code solution is, because it is really simple. So we're really just doing three things, and these are all graph calls. So we're going to hit groups to get the group. What group do we want to use, and what current memberships does it have? Device management detected apps is a really cool report that Microsoft are building at the moment and improving, and it's GA, right? It's not preview. We'll find out when we go to the thing. But it's really good, so you can actually start getting this really cool data on, hey, these are the apps in my environment, and these are the connected devices that we found. So there's the solution. So the example that I'm going to do is, we're literally just going to look for an application. If that application exists on a machine, I want it in a group. This is going to solve a bunch of problems for us, because if you're doing automated patch management, like with Patch My PC, one of the key problems is that we're deploying updates to everyone all the time. If we can filter that down to be hyper focused on, well, it's already got the app. So let's just start pushing the updates to that. So that's kind of what we're going to do. And then finally, the last one is devices. So again, we need to be able to know what the device is to move it into the group. So 3 endpoints, really, really easy. They all kind of work exactly the same, thanks to Graph. So you just need to know how to authenticate and do the stuff, and you're good to go. Okay, so first, as I said, some prereqs on your machine, because hopefully, in a perfect world, you wouldn't need to install some stuff. You just have any device and you could start developing. You kind of can if you do like code spaces and things like that. You can actually do this on any device. But because we're going to be working locally, because the Wi-Fi is terrible here, we need a couple of things. So first of all, we need WSL2 installed on the machine. We need Docker Desktop. You don't need to know how those things work, you just need them on your machine. We need some kind of Git management solution, Git SCM, just for source control. If you want to do the pipeline stuff for lifecycle management, which you do. We're going to use VS Code, and then we're going to get one extension for VS Code, which is remote development. This is actually kind of a package of a bunch of different remote tools, and they're all really, really good. So again, I don't know nearly enough about Docker, but with the remote development thing, I can just have VS Code built in a container in my environment with all the things I need to start working on functions. Cool. Okay. Let me see if this is going to work. Demo time? I guess it's demo time? Okay, so what I wanted to show you first of all was how to do this from scratch. The problem is the internet is pretty terrible here. I think we all just witnessed that fun example. So I've kind of pre-baked the initial thing just to show you what the experience is like, opening VS Code and just building from a nothing repository. So we're just going to sit down. If I had a hammock, I'd come and join you guys. But I'll try and step you through kind of what happens, and then we'll go into the one that I've already built and is ready to sort of play around. So can everyone see that? It's all good? Okay, cool. I kind of tried to zoom in a little bit on the video, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, so first things first, we're going to click on this little button. We're going to open a remote or repository in a container. I'm looking through my repos that I have in my GitHub account, and I'm looking for an empty Azure function that I created. Literally just a README file, just so I had an empty thing. Docker is now running. I've now got an instance of VS Code that is referencing data from a Docker container. And because I had nothing, actually, let me just quickly pause this. Is that going to work? Pause. Okay, cool. Essentially what happened there, no, it's not. That's great. I'm just going to run it again. Okay, so what was happening while we catch up was because I had nothing in the repository, the remote repositories tool was just like, I don't know what you want me to do. What do you want to do? So what pops up, and we're about to get to that, is it says, okay, so there's a couple of like pre-baked examples that Microsoft has provided us, and we're going to just use an Azure Function PowerShell example. There's heaps here, but if we look for that, we've got Azure Functions and PowerShell. So we're going to develop. So what this does now is it pulls down a bunch of stuff. It's about 3 gig in size, so there's a reason I didn't do this on conference Wi-Fi. But I've now got a fully functioning environment in a Docker container on my computer with all of the necessary tools to start building a PowerShell function. In, like, depending on your internet connection, that's like 5 minutes, and you've got a dev environment. And you can really change this and like modernize it when new versions of like the core function tools exist very, very easily. So I've just built a hello world function. Hopefully this is still running. We're just going to run this now. I think, yeah, task run. We're going to go function host start. So this builds the function locally in my environment. We should see here, that's the endpoint that we're going to hit. So cool. I'm going to go in and just do a call on that in a second. This is the best demo I've ever done. It's just working. So IRM get method URI. We're going to run this, and we get the output on the bottom of the screen. And it didn't work because I'm an idiot, and I didn't put in the parameters that are actually required for this code to run. So that's fine. I'll just change the URL. We'll put in the thing, run it, and it should say, hello, Ben. So genuinely within the space of, like, I sped up the download part, but all of this is done in real time. So again, depending on your internet connection, you can have the environment set up and ready to go in minutes. It's the coolest thing in the world because I got so bored of installing all of the .NET SDKs and the Azure Function core tools and all that sort of stuff. And then within a week, they're already out of date. So then I need to figure out what I need to do. And, like the back end of Azure Functions is always updating as well. So like there's all these new tools and things. And I just found myself not being able to keep up to date with all this stuff. So this kind of solves that problem. And it's really easy to set up. Cool. Okay. Not Q&As. We're still in demo world. Let me just drop out of this thing because I don't think we need this anymore. Okay. So what I'll do now, this is officially the demo time, so this is where everything's going to fail. So I have a function app that is pre-installed in my environment. There is nothing in here. Am I in the... Yes, this is my function app. Everything. Is this big enough everyone can see? Yep. Sweet. Okay, so the only interesting thing, and I do not have the time to talk about this right now, so come and see me after because I think this is really cool and I'm sure everyone else has figured this out already. But as far as authentication, that's always kind of like if you've never done graph stuff, authentication is the first thing that people are like, this is too hard, I give up. So with function apps and pretty much any app containerized solution that you can build in Azure, one of the key things is you can do managed identities. So the managed identity essentially gives you access to things in the resource, and that's kind of all it was really designed to do. But you can put in all the Graph API endpoints that you need, so the permissions to hit Graph. So when the function app runs, you immediately have authentication, and then you just swap the token out for a Graph token with one line of code, and you just move on. So authentication becomes a non-starter conversation. You don't need to worry about it. So that's really cool. I wrote a script that I'm going to do a blog post about, but if you want to see how it works, come and find me after this, because it's very easy, and I did not figure it out myself. Okay, so we've got nothing in here. The MSI stuff was the reason that I pre-built this stuff, because I just wanted to make sure the permissions were working properly. Let's go back over here. Okay, so what was I going to show you from here? Okay, let's have a look at that report first. So let's just check that data. So the app that my manager wants me to start automating the groups for is Notepad++, because it's the most important thing ever, and it's mission critical, and we need to make sure that all of our computers have it. Yes, exactly. Sure. Okay, why not? So let's go into the apps. This is going to be really annoying because the view looks different. No, it's fine. Okay, so if we open this up, we've got Monitor here. So this is kind of like the analytics for proactive remediation. So it's kind of like a reporting framework for applications. So we go into Monitor. There's no preview thing here, so I think we're good to say it's GA. Let's go into Discovered Apps. And we can see here, I've got page 1 of 21. Now, this is a relatively new thing where this is getting more mature, and it's actually scraping more information about what applications are on your machine. So this is to the point now where I genuinely will be using this in production for things, for more demos and all that sort of stuff, but it's almost ready for everyone to start getting very excited that this problem that a few people had has been solved, me included. So I'm just going to search for Notepad. Sweet, so we can see filtered down, we've got a whole bunch of different versions of Windows Notepad. Cool. And then we've got Notepad++, 64-bit, version 8.1.9. So this is every time it finds a new version, it's going to create a new entry, which is cool. So you can actually sort of track what devices have got old or out-of-date software. So your compliance reporting is kind of solved as well if you can hit this endpoint. We can see here that I've got 3 devices that have been found in my demo environment that have this software. If we go into the thing, we can actually see the name of that software, who the device is registered to, what the operating, all the metadata about the device. So this data, that stuff, I want to make a group out of that. So again, going back to the pain, you can't do that right now. So let's figure it out. Everything that we're doing in the portal is all just run by Graph. So we can open the dev tools and we can look at what the calls are and start building solutions, which is basically what we've done. So let's go into simple explanation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the code because I don't think that's super necessary. If you want to see how it works, properly, if you want to really nerd snipe me on the code and criticize how bad it is, come and see me after. We won't fight, but I'm happy to show you. It's just, let's just try and get this done quickly. So functionally, this is all code that's not going to run, but the process flow for what we're going to do is, here's our base graph URI, the group that I've created previously. I forgot to show you that one. Let me just bring this up. So I've got a group now just called Notepad++. There's a couple of devices in here. It's important to point out that because we're building our own dynamic groups, we can't use dynamic groups. So it has to be just a static managed security group. So we've got this group and we can see a couple of machines in there, but if we go to the discovered app list, one of those devices is actually not one of those things. So we want also, not only do we want to add devices to the group, we also just want to remove them if they don't need to be there. So we want to sort of solve for that as well. So let's go back here. So the first step, obviously, after authentication, is we just want to get the membership details of that group. So we just hit groups, the ID of the group, which we can grab from the overview of the security group, and then we're just going to hit members. That just gives us a list of all the devices that, or users, because they're all just objects, that exist in that security group. The next thing we do is we want to look for the detected apps. So this is basically just in code what we just did. So we're going to hit device management, detected apps, and we're going to filter against Notepad++. This is a fun one, and it took me a couple of minutes to try and figure out what was going on. Let's search for Notepad++. Wait, I'll have to go back. Monitor. That's good. Okay, it's there, but I don't want Windows Notepad. I don't want to have to filter at the PowerShell level. I want the filter in my call to be correct. Let's just put in Notepad++. Nothing came up. Why is that? So this request string is actually just building a HTML request. And so that essentially means that you need to convert the pluses to the HTTP encrypted version. But then you also need to do another encryption it's very confusing, and I'll show you the code. But so functionally, it's a little tricky. Okay. Let's pop back over here. So we get the data, device management, detected apps. We primarily do this so that we can get the ID of that report solution or report filter. Once we've got that, we can then jump into it. So we go into detected apps. We've got the ID from this one. We chuck that in here. We then hit managed devices. This just gives us that second screen that we click through with the list of all the devices in that report. Once we've got the group and the devices that were detected by that report, everything else is very, very simple. So we're going to iterate through the device. We need to pull out some information. So the actual object that we get on that managed device report or endpoint is not the same as an AAD object of that device or an Intune object of that device. Because hopefully everyone here knows that when you register a device in Intune, it creates two objects. One is the AAD object and one is the Intune object. And because groups are AAD, we need the AAD object. So what we essentially do here is we grab this, we then grab the Intune device data so that we can get the ID to key off and get the AAD stuff. It's kind of confusing, but I basically just need that ID, and we can get it from this. So we're going to hit Manage Devices, we get that. We then swap out everything so that we can get the AAD device ID as well. We do this with a filter, so device ID equals, and we can get the Intune device AAD device ID. This is actually the name of the property as well. It's great. So once we've got that AAD device ID. So now we can just start adding or deleting or doing whatever we want to that group. So this is what a post looks like. So we're going to post two groups. We know what the group ID is, and then it's just members, $ref. I don't know why $ref is the thing, but you need to put that on the endpoint. Authorization, again, we all know that. And then we just add in a body, which is just OData ID, directory objects, and then the AAD device ID. Put that in, you're good to go. We're going to do one call at a time for this sort of stuff, but you could be smart about this and you could batch the requests. This is just a quick and dirty solution to sort of show you guys how this works. And then finally, if we want to delete an object from that group, we do kind of the same thing. So we hit members, but instead of a body request, we just put in the AAD device ID in the name and just delete, and it's gone from that group. So this is kind of, how this is going to work. Okay, so let me drop out of this and go into the next one. Okay, so this is the Docker container that we did the video on, but this is the sort of the repository that kind of has some sample code in it right now. If I open this up, and again, please tell me if this is too small. if we go in here, I've got a couple of things pre-populated. One of the things before we get into the solution code, because I've got 19 minutes and I think I should be fine, the dev container is the thing that gets pre-populated if you just launch the remote repository stuff from an empty repo. So this is the sort of stuff that like builds the container. And I know there's a bunch of people out here that know Docker better than me, so I'm definitely butchering this. But we've just got some Docker file info with a variant name, and what this is actually doing is it's building the location that we're going to build from. So right now I'm building this from the latest version of the PowerShell function solution, which is running on version 4, and then the latest version of PowerShell that is available for this, which is 7.2 point whatever. Going back to what I was saying about how I always hated having to uninstall and reinstall the different like SDKs and core tools, if I just want to change this, I just change the variant and then rebuild the container. And within minutes, I've got a new version, and that PowerShell version will change and all that sort of stuff. I had a really cool demo that I was going to show of doing that, but I do not trust the Wi-Fi here, so I'm not going to do it. But suffice to say, whatever this is going to build that environment for you. And there's, if you click on this link, it will take you to the information on what this is actually doing with a list of all available environments that you can essentially build from. So it's really, really cool to sort of dynamically generate your Docker container. Okay. What are we going to do now? I haven't got this far. Okay, so I created kind of like a hello world function called get devices. Well, X get devices, I guess. Who hasn't played with Azure Functions before? Just a show of hands. Anyone? Okay, so there's a decent amount. So the sort of hierarchy of a PowerShell Azure function is it's literally a folder, and anything that runs in run.ps1 is what's going to happen when that function is triggered, whether that be a HTTP call or just a cron job or it's not called cron job, a scheduled task thing. It's a cron job. I'm sure that you probably have to pay licensing to say that. I'm probably very broke right now. But anyway, so let's go into run.ps1, and hopefully this logically makes sense to everyone. Really the only difference, stuff that we need to understand in an Azure function for PowerShell is we just need to load this namespace so that we can get some information. There's a couple of libraries that we actually need to use. This has kind of been keyed off other languages. It's not super PowerShell-y. It's getting better. Like ages ago, you needed to know a lot about the different types and HTTP libraries and that sort of stuff. But really, we use that. We've then got some parameters to the call. So we've got request and trigger metadata. So, you know, what's coming in and how did it get triggered so that you can actually do stuff with the input if you are doing posts. We've got our auth, which is, it's kind of, I find this stuff really boring. But again, if anyone wants to talk about this stuff, come and see me. I'm really happy with how this works because I can now test this locally with like a service principal account with, you know, a client ID and a client secret. But once I yeet it to production, it's just going to use that managed identity, and I don't know what the credentials are for that because I don't need to, and it just works. So this line 8, is actually what happens every single time this runs in production. It's one line, get AZ access token, and the resource is graph.microsoft.com. Once we've got that, we're home and hosed. It's really, really cool. This is the stuff that we do as far as local development because we can't access the managed identity for obvious reasons. The rest of this stuff, so again, this is just my like hello world example. We're doing a get. I just want to see the list of devices. I kind of just wanted to make sure that I had the right permissions to do this sort of stuff. If this will work, then the other thing's going to work. The rest of the stuff here, so you know, we're just getting the data. We're just going to count how many devices do I have in my environment and give me all of the information on that. The status code, this is kind of why we need that system.net library, because we're returning a HTTP result. Steve's falling asleep. Everyone, point at him. Cool, everything else is kind of fine. There's a push output binding thing here. Again, we can talk about it after this session. Oh, now Yap's falling asleep. Okay, so cool, the code is there. I think it might work, but we need to test it before we push it to production. So let's just go ahead and you know, see how we actually do this. So in my Docker container, I'm just going to Control-Shift-P or F1 to open up the command palette. I'm going to go to task, And I'm going to do this one here, function host start PowerShell. You don't need the -- PowerShell. It should be able to look at what you're doing and understand that what you're doing is a PowerShell function and build correctly, but I was having problems, so I fixed it. So let's load this up. We should see here, it's building the environment for me. I've now got 2 endpoints here. This is kind of cool. If I open this in a browser, it just shows me, yeah, cool, my function 4.0 app is up and running. So I'm just tunneled in through my Docker instance. Again, nothing else installed on my computer. I've now got this endpoint that I can start building and testing. And as of functions 4.0, you can now do hot reload of all of your PowerShell function apps. So you can change the code, hit save, without having to turn the function app off and then turn it back on, which was the thing you had to do probably 6 months ago. So it's absolutely fantastic. All right, so let's go back to this. So it's running, so we want to hit this endpoint here. I think I have, yes, I do. Okay, so let's go to this one. So send request to get localhost 7071 API X get devices. So that's just the name of the function. That's what we're going to call. We're not doing anything fancy. Locally, you don't need any authentication to run this because you're authenticated. So there's no code or key or anything that you need. So we'll just hit this. And just focus on the logs and we'll see. So we've started the authentication process. It's completed. And I just said, give me all the things. I found 21 devices in the environment, so let's just output that data to the HTTP result, which we can see here. It took 8 seconds to run, primarily because I'm doing some weirdness with the authentication. I was talking just before this session about potentially why it's taking that long, but I think once we move it into production, it's going to be a lot faster because we don't need to do 2 levels of authentication. So we don't need to get the token and then swap it for a different token. So it should be a lot faster. But yeah, the data, we've got everything. Everything about the devices in my environment is here. So feel free to take a screenshot and try and hack them because I don't care. So yeah, this works. So now that we know that my managed identity is working correctly, and I can get access to the things, let's go into the actual solution. Again, I'm not going to go too much into depth with this, but just hopefully that sort of overview of the process makes sense. The code itself is, to me, I think it's very simple, but I will definitely would love to talk about it after. So let's open this up. I'm going to close a bunch of things because working on this small screen is driving me insane. Cool. So the same framework, right? We've got our using namespace, we've got our param, we've got a little try statement here. This is a little bigger, but essentially we do our auth, which is the same code. We're going to go through, I've just set a couple of parameters. You'd probably not put this stuff in hard-coded things. You'd put these in as environment variables in your production environment, but let's show off bad practices and see how they propagate. Cool, so once we've got that, I've got one function that just sort of helps me wrap my graph calls because I don't want to have to write them over and over again. I think this is a running theme at PSConfE EU and everywhere in general that you should be tool building instead of just writing scripts to solve the issue that's in front of you. So this is a function that I reuse over and over and over again. I haven't published it because everyone has their own solution for this, so we can all build our own wheels. So invoke graph calls, very basic. Oh, I actually have one more, format result. This is for something else that we did for the Intune training video that we did. And it's just nice, so I just threw it in there as well. So the rest of the stuff we do, again, we've gone through that sort of simple overview. So we get the existing group members. This is really easy. And because of that function app, the function that I wrote, this is what the endpoint or the call looks like. Invoke graph call, hit members. So this is the exact same experience that we had. We're going to find the detected app objects. We're going to go through all that. We loop here. There's some for each fun. But we're just getting the information that we understood from the sample environment. Finally, we're going to go through the add stuff. So we're going to add to group. Again, I'm just creating the very basic result, which is that OData ID, base graph URI, directory objects, and then the AAD device ID. I post that. It's going to add. If it shouldn't be there, we just go through and we delete. So for each TR and devices to remove, we just hit that delete call. So method delete. Really, to me, this is really simple, and hopefully to you guys it is as well. I know I like to sort of ramble a little bit when I get into this stuff. But functionally, as long as there's no major errors there, we're going to send back a 200 or a HTTP OK. In the body, we're going to have the result, which is the function that just like formats the thing so it's nice for me. In a real world scenario, you would not run this as a HTTP endpoint. You'd run this as a cron job, potentially run it once a day. Once a day is probably enough for this sort of stuff, especially with the data that we're working with. You don't need it to be 3 minutes, right? You just need to make sure that you understand that it's going to run every day and it's going to keep that device up to date. If there are any problems in the code, and hopefully there's not, I did make a lot of sacrifices to the demo god last night. And that's why I'm feeling a little bit gross right now. We're going to catch that error, and we're just going to change the response to bad requests, which is like 400 or something. And then we're just going to throw the exception message back to us to make sure that, hey, it broke, and this is why it broke. Make your code better. And then finally, we go to push output binding, and then we just send whatever the result of body is. So if it's an error, we get the error data. If it's a success, we get the result data that we want. So let's just go ahead and run this locally, and then with just under 9 minutes, we'll do the pipeline stuff. Okay, let's go back into my example. Okay, here's my cheat. Just gonna bring this up. Actually, make this bigger because the logs are important here. Is that all good? Everyone can see that? Okay, so my function app is still running. I'm just going to hit this endpoint now. So this is my invoke dynamic group. Again, as I said, you would not run this as a HTTP call. You would just have this scheduled. So there's no need to send the request to trigger it. But that's not fun in demo time, just waiting a couple of minutes for a thing to kick off. So we're just going to send request. So we start the authentication dance. Again, 7-ish seconds to complete that. Cool. We've authenticated. We're going to get the existing group members. We found 2 current group members. We found the detected app object. So cool. We found Notepad++. We found the 3 devices with Notepad. Let's just get started and start adding that stuff in. This is the AAD device ID. I want to change that to the device name, but there's reasons. I just wanted it to be clean. So this has gone through. We found 3 devices. We added, and then, hey, this device is already a member, so don't do anything. This is actually a really important thing because if you re-add a device, it repolls and resyncs, and there's been real-world examples of very, very large AAD device security groups constantly being force refreshed that may or may not have contributed to outages. So you don't want to aggressively change this stuff, which is why if it's already there, we don't touch it. We just want to add or delete if we have to. And then finally, the logs here, hey, this device shouldn't be a member. Let's just get rid of it. So if we pop back to the my portal, and refresh this. Come on, internet, you can do it. Cool, it's worked. So we've got our 3 devices that we know have Notepad++ based on that report, and that random device that was in there is now gone. Why that's cool, the delete thing specifically, if you then use this group to key off and deploy updates or policies or whatever, and you just really quickly wanted that update to go out to a machine, you could add it in there knowing that, next time the script runs, it's just going to get rid of it for you. So you can kind of do like ad hoc fixes and deploy things out that way, and then you don't have to clean up after yourself. It'll sort itself out, which is a fun little unintended consequence, I think. Let's just pop back here, 6 minutes. I really want to do this GitHub thing. Let's quickly go here and just have a look at the output of the data. It's not very exciting because you wouldn't do this in production, but I just got some stuff here. So like, hey, this device, it's compliant because old code and I should have deleted it, but I didn't. It's a member, yes, and the action was added. So we go through and we just got some information. So yeah, cool, we added. With this one, is a member was true, but no action was taken. So we just have a result to basically let us know that, hey, a thing was done, but we didn't actually touch that machine, so it's fine. And then finally, we remove this device because it's not compliant according to our expectations. So we're just going to get that thing out. So that's the example. Let's go ahead and let's push this into our tenant now, or into our function app. I'm going to do it from VS Code, and then 5 minutes, I'll try and do the GitHub Actions stuff. If it doesn't work, then again, I'll show you this stuff after the session as well. So let's just go back into the command palette. I'm going to go function, deploy to function app. We're going to look for my one, which is the AAD demo. It's going to give me a prompt here saying, Are you sure you want to do this? Because I'm pushing this to production and not a dev staging slot, so this could be really bad, but it's fine. Everyone ships to prod, right? So this is going to go through, it's going to do its thing. Let me see if I can bring this up and have a look at the output. The actual solution for like packaging and deploying this stuff, if no one's used it, it's literally just zipping the file and just like kind of FTP transfer to the environment. It then bounces the app or the web service, and the code exists, and everyone's happy. So in that solution, then a dev pipeline for this is very easy, right? All we need to do is just, maybe we've got some pester unit tests, and we just want to zip the code up and then just ship it over. So there's a bunch of really easy ways to do this. We'll just wait for this to finish, and then we'll have a look at the solution, and then we'll have a look at how we can sort of really quickly get some CI/CD fun into this. Shouldn't actually take too long. I'll just, while this is running, I'm going to go to my GitHub. Did I not log in? No, I did. That's cool. All right, let's go into this one here. Profile repositories. AAD demo app. This one. Yep. All right. So this is the this is the code for what I'm showing you now. Let's have a look. Warning. Yep. Cool. That's fine. So what's actually interesting about this, it's giving me a heads up. It says that it can tell that I'm doing some authentication stuff, and that if I'm not careful, it's going to spit out the auth tokens to storage. There's ways to fix that, and I have fixed that in the code. So if you're using this as a reference to like build, know that I've solved that. There is no tokens that get stored locally in the environment. One caveat here is that if someone's got access to your function apps environment, you've got bigger problems, so don't stress too much on that. Okay, cool. So that's deployed. Let's have a look at that in the portal just to make sure that that's looking good. PSConfE, this one here, refresh. 2 minutes to go. Three minutes. Oh yeah, nice. Cool, so yeah, thanks. So this is my function app. I've got my two endpoints. I've got get devices and invoke dynamic group, which is cool. That's working. So now I realized that I forgot to delete my hello world example. I don't need that in my production environment. So let's very quickly go in here. I'm going to go into deployment center. So this is going to go, well, you know, we've seen that there is no current CI/CD pipeline, so you should really, really do that. How are we going to do that? So we're going to go in. So my code exists in GitHub. So let's go here, organization, tabs not spaces. It's a very good organization to work for. Repository, we are going to look for, let's go PSConfE. Is it going to find it? It is. AZ function app, branch is main. Build, what are we going to do here? So we can configure, the runtime is, like, this is a weird UI bug. The runtime is very much configured to be the latest thing, but that's fine. We're just going to go ahead and have a look at the preview. So this is actually dynamically building an action or a GitHub Actions CI/CD pipeline for you. So if you've not had experience with doing GitHub Actions, this is kind of the best way to learn, because what we're doing is very simple, but sort of writing this stuff, if you've never done it before, can be complicated. YAML's a little bit difficult to write. It's all space controlled and all that sort of stuff. Tabs are better than spaces. But you know, this is essentially going to do the thing, and it's also going to build the secrets that we need in the repository in a way that you will never know what that secret is, and no one else will either, which is another real benefit to do this. So right now we could copy and paste this into GitHub, but it's not going to work because it's not going to generate the secrets for us. 30 seconds. We're going to go to close. I'm just going to hit save, and that's going to set up the deployment for me. Let's see how quickly this runs. It looks pretty good to me. Let's go over to GitHub. I'm going to go into Actions. Now, ignore these ones. These were done before. I deleted everything and started again. But check this out. So add or update, so this is the name of the commit that Azure did for me. It added the pipeline to my repository on my behalf. I'm now running a CI/CD pipeline that is going to essentially rebuild and push this out for me. I doubt we're going to get time to see the full solution here. But functionally now, whenever I make a change to my main repository with this template, it's going to repackage and push this up for me. It's almost done. So, like, hopefully I've explained to you guys that this stuff is really easy. The code that you sort of do your business logic in can be as complicated or as simple as you need to, but the tooling around this stuff is really, really, really advanced and will just like do the work for you so you don't need to think about it. So for those who put their hand up and said that they've never done anything without Azure Functions, I really hope that you do after this. For everyone else, thank you. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Does anyone have any questions? It's okay. What's up?
So you were using the managed service identity for the Connect AC account?
Yes.
Couldn't you use the Connect AC account identity?
Okay, so the question was, couldn't I just use the identity authentication? Yes. So that is what you do in, when you build a PowerShell function, there is a file called profile that essentially preloads stuff for you. So like if you've got really complex functions and you want them to exist in your environment, or even just environment variables, you set them there, and then when the function app runs from cold start, that stuff runs. So that's kind of how we get the MSI solution in the production environment. So if we go in here and we actually have a look at it. Yes, this is, I've not touched this. This is fully standard. So this was that line that I was saying that you really need to run if you're doing this yourself. Disable context autosave. Don't save this stuff. Like tokens generally expire within a couple of minutes, but let's be safe. And then finally connect AZ account identity. So that's how you do it in production, but because I don't know what the password is for the managed identity, I can't use it outside of that scope. And that's by design. There are ways to get it. Don't do that. Just have another method for local development. Yeah. Any other questions? Go for it. I did, yes. Okay, so the question was around how do I actually then use Graph in the managed identity? So I wasn't going to talk about this now, but I can just quickly show you the result of the script that I wrote that just sort of automates the process of adding those permissions. If we go into, I want this one, Microsoft, yeah, that's right. I go into Azure Active Directory. Zoom in is awful. Enterprise applications. We're just going to change the filter, add filter, application type equals, and the value is managed identity, apply. Let's find the one that we did. It's always, the managed identity is always, for anyone that hasn't played with this stuff, it's always the name of the app or resource that you've created, so it's kind of easy to find. But it is, generally you've got to change the filter, so it's kind of hidden. But if we go into the AAD demo, so out of the box, managed identities will have no other permissions other than what is in the resource. And again, that's kind of by design because they, these are service principles, so they can do damage. There's currently no way to add those permissions to a managed identity in the UI right now. I'm sure there will be. But for now, if we just go in and have a look at the permissions. So again, there's no save, there's no way to do this. I can't grant admin consent, but I've got the Graph permissions in here. So I wrote a script based off someone else's amazing work that I cannot remember his name. He's an MVP based in Scotland. But he's kind of figured out what the actual Graph calls were to do this. I just wrapped them all up in a function and made it just so that you just go, I know I need this, 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 and this. Hit the thing, give me the permissions. That takes a couple of minutes to sort of replicate, and then you are good to go. Any other questions? Go for it.
Does the device management detected apps endpoint also report apps that were not installed using the component portal?
So the question was, does that report that kind of is integral to the whole solution, does that detect apps that were not installed from the company portal? The answer is yes, 100%. So if you actually look at the logs in the Intune management extension, you can actually watch now and see that it's essentially scraping your add remove programs hierarchy or in the registry and like getting that information and then sending that back up to Intune. So if it's installed on your computer, it's going to be there. So you can use this to see who's got Steam. Yeah, kind of. It's getting better. It's not perfect. Like you might miss some stuff, but previously it was only store apps, and it was terrible. No one used it, and everyone complained. So now we're getting this data, and I don't actually think it's been promoted very much. So maybe this is the first time you've really seen this and gone, oh, there's actual value there, and there is. There really is actual value in this.
Exactly, because I know from the endpoint management console, it's very limited what you see there.
Yes, correct. So yeah, the reports are getting better, and they'll improve. Cool. Okay. Any other questions, or do we want to wrap this up? Cool. Yeah. Definitely. Awesome. All right. Thank you.